Hey, good morning. Happy Wednesday. Of course, you know I've got my cup of coffee here. Maybe you have yours as well. This little chat we call Coffee with PC. We do it every Wednesday, and I appreciate all of you who spend these few minutes with me. It is a busy week for us here at church. This weekend, this Friday night and all day Saturday, and then a little bit on Sunday morning for our service is Vacation Bible School. So you can't see, but around us, we've moved all the chairs. We've got some decorations going up here and over there. So a lot going on this week, but I did want to spend these few minutes catching up with you as we continue to wander through the Bible. We're trying to look at it from the big picture. What can it show us? And we are in the book of Judges. As I said last week, it's a book that is in many ways pretty sad because it's a book that goes around a pretty sad cycle where Israel betrays God, begins to chase after foreign gods or idols. God punishes them for that. A neighbor, another country comes in and oppresses them. They, in their distress, cry out to God. He raises up a deliverer, the judges that this book is named after, and there are several of them in here who liberate Israel from militarily from these surrounding nations who have oppressed them. They hang around for a while, everything is great, and as soon as they go away, as soon as they die, it seems like Israel starts all over again. And even the book itself is kind of a downward spiral. From early on, some of the judges that are more meritorious to the last kind of longest story of Samson, he is not exactly a judge that we want to emulate. He delivered Israel, but had his own set of issues along the way. But we're not going to look at any one of the particular judges in this kind of overview of things. Last week we saw the idea that one of the problems that caused this cycle was that one generation passed away without telling the next generation about who God is and what he had done for Israel. And so without reference to who God is, without reference to his goodness, to his deliverance, to his provision, it was easy to chase after some other God. And so that started the cycle. We get to the end of the book today. It's actually the last verse in the entire book of Judges, and this is what it says. In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as he saw fit. Or another version, another translation says everyone did what was right in their own eyes. We read this, actually it's repeated a couple of times, at least once, maybe twice other times toward the end of the book of Judges. And you can read that and say, oh, I get it, because the very next book, well, not the next book, but the next era of the history of Israel comes into the kingdom where first Saul and then David and Solomon and so on come in. So you can read that and think, oh, the problem is a political one. They need a good king. They need a king to step up. And if that was the case, you would think that when we get to the books of Samuel and Kings and Chronicles and we read about all of these kings, that it would be victory after victory and faithfulness after faithfulness. But it's not. No matter how good or bad the king was, that's not the issue. The issue for Judges isn't a political one. The issue for Israel isn't a political one. It's not just that they needed a strong leader, because one of the realities that we'll see, I don't know if we'll cover this verse, but I'll kind of give you a preview a few chapters or books ahead. One of the issues that happens in Israel is they reject God as their king and ask for a king like all the other countries, because they've forgotten who God is and what he has done. And God says that to the prophet Samuel. They haven't abandoned you. They've betrayed me. They've abandoned me as their king. So the issue isn't a political one. The issue very much here is a spiritual one. And we see it summarized by everyone did as they saw fit, or everyone did what was right in their own eyes. The question wasn't, what does God desire? What does God want us to do? Who are we as the people of God? How are we as the people of God supposed to act and proceed? The question is, what do I want to do? What feels good to me? And that just brings a whole host of problems, even among some of the latter judges. And reality is that's not so detached from our culture today, our world today. We live in a culture that's very much individualistic. The biblical culture, the ancient Near Eastern culture, was more communal. We're a very individualistic culture. And in our individualism, it's often this kind of mantra that percolates through our culture that we should follow our heart. That's one. You just follow your heart. Or you live your truth. Or you should do what makes you happy. And these are ways people approach life that say the exact same thing as this verse in Judges. Everybody does what makes them happy. Everyone does what's right in their own eyes. That there is no such thing as objective truth. There is no God that controls my life and directs my life. It's up to me. What do I like? What is my truth? What is my feeling in this situation? That's where Israel was, that caused all of their trouble. And it's not so far removed from where we are today. What Judges shows is what happens when a people lose their moral compass, when they abandon God and His Word, when they failed to pass on the tales of God's goodness, His deliverance, His provision for His people, and they just chose to pursue whatever they wanted to. All sorts of corruption, broken down relationships, certainly spiritual decline happens to create the mess that we find in not just Judges, but even in the era of the kings of Israel. Even in the era when they did have a king, still people did what was right in their own eyes. And ultimately, as we've been talking about on Sunday mornings as we're going through the minor prophets, it cost Israel the punishment of first Assyria for the northern kingdom and then Babylon for the southern kingdom. Ultimately, they didn't learn these lessons. They kept doing what was right in their own eyes, even with a king, and they kept forgetting to pass down the goodness and grace of God from generation to generation. And maybe the question that we should ask when we read and come to the end of the book of Judges and we see that particular verse that closes the book, maybe what we're meant to think, and maybe what the writer intended when they recorded this history, is for us to think there's got to be a better way. I mean, surely there is a better way than this repetitive cycle that we've seen Israel that leads to destruction and oppression over and over again. There's got to be more. And I think that brings us back to the reality of who is the rightful king. Because what happens is ultimately the issue with humanity, the issue with Israel isn't they needed a better human leader. It was they needed to understand who God is and what He has done. And the issue for us today as we look back is that it's not just a better human leader of whatever kind, political, religious, or otherwise, that we might look to or admire or hope for direction. It is about understanding that God is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and He expressed Himself perfectly to us through Jesus, who's also called, the one whose name will be called King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the one who is God with us, as we've talked about previously, that in Jesus, what happens is God comes to be here and to live out His life and to show it is possible to live on this earth, in this world, in perfect communion with the Heavenly Father and live out in a way that was transformative to everybody who came in contact with Him. The reason He could work miracles, the reason His teaching was so well received, the reason the church still exists today is because Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, God that became flesh, God with us, lived out the true kingship of God in His life, as everything He did was ordered and instructed by the Father. And as He shows us that, He shows us that that's the key for us. It's not to do what makes us happy, because here's what I've learned. What makes me happy today may or may not make me happy tomorrow. And what I think today is the most important thing, and I pursue it with all I have, and in a year or 5 years or 10 years, I might look back and regret those same decisions. But what I've found is I have strived to follow Jesus. I've strived to learn who He is, to see His character and nature, to see His goodness and grace in my life and in the history of His work on earth. I've seen that I don't look back with regrets when I've chosen to follow Him. I don't look back with wondering why I did it that way, or feeling like I've been betrayed by my own best instincts, because God never leads us astray. He leads us into the kind of life Jesus says that it's abundant life. And so I encourage you, join us as we learn what it means to follow Jesus, as we learn in a world where everybody does what's right in their own eyes, that there is a true King, and His name is Jesus, and He came and lived and died and rose again so that all who place their faith in Him can have abundant life, as He says, but also have part in His eternal kingdom, where all of the pain and the struggle of this life doesn't count anymore, because He's going to bring a brand new order of things. I'd love for you to join us as we learn that together, as I learn what it means to grow more and more, as I learn more about Him and grow more like Him. Come along for the journey with us. That's what church is about. It's not about just the imparting of information from one person to the other, studying a book. It's about your life being transformed so we get to know who God is, specifically as he revealed himself to Jesus. So hey, we're here. Sundays, 9 o'clock. We're going to be continuing in our study of the minor prophets. We'll finish out the book of Amos this week. And then next Wednesday, we'll pick up, I think we'll look at a little bit in the next book in the Bible, the book of Ruth. It has some cool hints of who Jesus is and what he came to do. So until next week, when we touch base again, I'm going to go finish up my coffee, finish getting ready for Bible school, and I hope to see you with us in worship on Sunday.